Before we begin, let me ask you to take a moment to engage with this content. Please give this video a like if you find it informative, subscribe to our channel for more in-depth historical documentaries about World War II, and let us know in the comments where you're watching from today. Your support helps us continue bringing these important stories to light. In the sweltering heat of a Hawaiian morning in 1942, American military engineers faced a sobering reality that would reshape the entire Pacific campaign. The Japanese Empire had constructed the most formidable defensive network in military history across thousands of Pacific islands, utilizing natural caves, reinforced concrete bunkers, and underground tunnel systems that seemed impregnable to conventional weaponry. What followed would be the development of a weapon so psychologically devastating that Japanese veterans would later describe it as more terrifying than the atomic bombs themselves. The early months of America's Pacific campaign revealed a harsh truth about modern warfare. Traditional artillery bombardments, naval gunfire, and aerial bombing proved largely ineffective against Japanese fortified positions. At Guadalcanal and Tarawa, American forces discovered that enemy defenders had retreated deep into cave networks and concrete bunkers, emerging only when American troops approached, turning every advance into a deadly game of hide-and-seek. The standard American infantry arsenal, dominated by the M1 Garand rifle and Thompson submachine gun, was woefully inadequate for rooting out defenders from these prepared positions. American military leadership recognized that conventional tactics would result in catastrophic casualties as they advanced toward the Japanese home islands. General Douglas MacArthur and Admiral Chester Nimitz both understood that new approaches were desperately needed. The Chemical Warfare Service, previously focused on defensive preparations against potential gas attacks, suddenly found itself tasked with developing offensive fire weapons that could reach into caves and bunkers where other weapons failed. The first American attempt at flamethrower technology proved almost comically inadequate. The M1 flamethrower, hastily developed in 1942, was described by troops as a pathetic contraption with unreliable ignition systems and pressurized fuel tanks that frequently malfunctioned. With an effective range of barely 15 yards and often less, the M1 was more dangerous to its operator than to enemy positions. Troops quickly lost confidence in the weapon, and early combat reports from the Solomon Islands campaign detailed multiple instances where flamethrowers failed to ignite at critical moments. The breakthrough came through chemistry rather than engineering. Throughout 1942 and 1943, Chemical Warfare Service laboratories worked frantically to develop a fuel mixture that would burn longer and stick to targets more effectively than ordinary gasoline. The early experiments involved metallic soap compounds mixed with gasoline, creating what technicians called thickened fuel that doubled the range of flame projectors. However, these early mixtures remained inconsistent and unpredictable in combat conditions. By early 1944, American scientists had perfected what would become known as napalm, a revolutionary fuel mixture using aluminum soap compounds that created a substance burning at temperatures up to 2,190 degrees Fahrenheit. Unlike gasoline, which exploded in a brief, spectacular bloom, napalm projected from flamethrowers as a dark, concentrated jet that stuck to whatever it touched and continued burning for extended periods. This development transformed the flamethrower from an unreliable curiosity into a devastating battlefield weapon. The psychological research conducted alongside technical development revealed why flamethrowers would prove so effective against Japanese defenders. Military psychologists studied captured Japanese documents and interrogated prisoners to understand the cultural and tactical mindset of enemy forces. They discovered that Japanese defensive doctrine emphasized death before dishonor, with soldiers trained to fight to the last man rather than surrender. However, the same cultural conditioning that made Japanese soldiers fearless in the face of bullets and artillery created an unexpected vulnerability to fire-based weapons. Japanese military training prepared soldiers for honorable death in combat, but flamethrowers offered no possibility of heroic resistance. A defender facing rifle fire could return accurate shots, potentially taking enemy soldiers with him in death. Artillery bombardments allowed for last-minute charges or suicidal attacks against advancing troops. But flames provided no opportunity for counterattack or honorable death, only the choice between fleeing one's position or being consumed alive. The development of the M2 flamethrower in summer 1944 marked the culmination of American flame weapon research. Weighing 68 pounds when loaded with napalm, the M2 could project its deadly payload up to 40 yards with reliable accuracy. The weapon's backpack frame design distributed weight more effectively than earlier models, while improved ignition systems virtually eliminated the misfires that had plagued the M1 series. Most importantly, the M2's fuel capacity of 3¼ gallons provided enough napalm for multiple engagements before requiring refueling. Testing conducted at Aberdeen Proving Ground and other facilities demonstrated the M2's effectiveness against replica Japanese fortifications. Engineers constructed exact duplicates of captured bunker designs, complete with firing ports, ventilation systems, and underground chambers. Test results showed that a single 3-second burst from an M2 flamethrower could neutralize an entire bunker complex, with napalm flowing through firing ports and ventilation systems to reach defenders in interior chambers. The weapon's psychological impact extended beyond its immediate tactical effects. American military planners recognized that flamethrowers would serve a dual purpose, eliminating fortified positions while simultaneously breaking the morale of nearby enemy forces who witnessed their use. Intelligence reports from early flamethrower deployments indicated that Japanese soldiers would often abandon well-prepared positions rather than face the possibility of flame attack, even when those positions could have been defended successfully against conventional weapons. As American forces prepared for the major amphibious assaults of 1944, the stage was set for the flamethrower to emerge as the most feared weapon in the Pacific theater. The technical problems had been solved, production was ramping up to meet demand, and tactical doctrines were being developed to maximize the weapon's effectiveness. However, the true test would come in the blood-soaked beaches and cave-riddled islands that lay ahead, where Japanese defenders would confront their deepest fears, made manifest in streams of liquid fire. The humid morning air of Saipan on June 15, 1944, carried with it the acrid smell of cordite and the distant rumble of naval bombardment as American Marines prepared for what would become the first major test of the new M2 flamethrower in Pacific combat. Within hours, this revolutionary weapon would demonstrate its devastating effectiveness and establish itself as the most psychologically impactful tool in the American arsenal, forever changing the nature of island warfare in the Pacific theater. The initial landings on Saipan proceeded according to plan, with Marines securing beachheads against determined but conventional Japanese resistance. However, as American forces pushed inland, they encountered the same type of fortified defensive positions that had proven so costly at Tarawa and other island campaigns. Japanese engineers had spent months preparing Saipan's natural cave systems and constructing reinforced concrete bunkers that could withstand even direct hits from naval artillery. These positions, manned by experienced troops from the 31st Army, represented the most formidable defensive network American forces had yet encountered. The breakthrough moment came during the second day of fighting, when Marine assault teams equipped with M2 flamethrowers approached a complex of interconnected bunkers that had pinned down an entire rifle company for over 6 hours. Previous attempts to neutralize the position using bazookas, rifle grenades, and demolition charges had failed, with each assault being repelled by interlocking machine gun fire from concealed positions. The Marines had suffered 12 casualties attempting to advance across the open ground before the Japanese strongpoint. When the flamethrower team moved into position, protected by suppressing fire from Browning automatic rifles and Thompson submachine guns, the tactical situation changed dramatically within minutes. The M2 operator, covered by his assistant and a rifle squad, maneuvered to within 30 yards of the primary bunker opening. The first burst of napalm, lasting approximately 4 seconds, sent a jet of burning fuel directly through the bunker's firing port and into the interior chamber. The psychological impact was immediate and devastating. Japanese soldiers who had shown no fear of conventional weapons, who had fought with suicidal determination against overwhelming odds, suddenly found themselves facing an enemy they could neither fight nor flee from effectively. The napalm's unique properties, its tendency to stick to surfaces and continue burning for extended periods, meant that defenders could not simply wait out the attack as they might with other weapons. The burning fuel flowed through the bunker's ventilation system, creating an oven-like environment that made continued defense impossible. Within minutes of the flamethrower attack, white flags began appearing from adjacent bunkers that had not even been directly targeted. Japanese soldiers, witnessing the fate of their comrades in the flamed position, chose surrender over the possibility of facing the same weapon. This psychological effect would prove to be one of the flamethrower's most significant tactical advantages. Its ability to break enemy morale across an entire defensive sector through demonstration of its capabilities against a single target. The success at Saipan led to rapid deployment of flamethrowers across Marine and Army units throughout the Pacific Theater. By August 1944, every Marine division included dedicated flamethrower teams, with operators receiving specialized training in the weapon's tactical employment. The training emphasized not just technical proficiency, but also the psychological aspects of flame warfare, teaching operators to maximize the terror effect through proper positioning and timing of their attacks. However, the effectiveness of the M2 flamethrower came at a terrible cost for its operators. Japanese forces quickly learned to identify and prioritize flamethrower teams as high-value targets. Snipers received specific instructions to target the distinctive backpack fuel tanks, while machine gunners were trained to concentrate fire on flame weapon operators before engaging other American troops. The average life expectancy of a flamethrower operator in combat dropped to just weeks, making it one of the most dangerous assignments in the American military. The psychological burden on American flamethrower operators proved almost as challenging as the physical dangers they faced. Unlike conventional weapons that produced instantaneous casualties, flamethrowers created prolonged suffering that operators could hear and sometimes see in horrifying detail. Many flamethrower veterans reported that they could hear screaming from bunkers for 15 to 20 seconds after firing, creating lasting psychological trauma that would affect them long after the war ended. Medical records from the Veterans Administration would later show that flamethrower operators experienced post-traumatic stress disorder at rates 40% higher than conventional infantry soldiers. The intimate nature of flame warfare, combined with the weapon's horrific effects on enemy personnel, created unique psychological pressures that military medical personnel were unprepared to address. Some operators began wearing earplugs to block out the sounds of their victims, while others requested transfer to conventional weapons rather than continue using flamethrowers. Despite these psychological costs, battlefield effectiveness reports consistently praised the M2 flamethrower's tactical impact. Intelligence analysts noted that Japanese radio intercepts increasingly mentioned flame weapons, with enemy commanders requesting specific tactics for dealing with flamethrower attacks. Japanese defensive manuals, captured during subsequent operations, devoted entire sections to countering flame weapons, indicating the profound impact these weapons had on enemy planning and morale. The weapon's effectiveness led to continuous tactical refinements throughout late 1944 and early 1945. Marine assault teams developed the corkscrew and blowtorch technique, combining flamethrowers with demolition teams in coordinated attacks on fortified positions. The procedure involved using flame weapons to neutralize defenders, followed immediately by explosive charges to permanently seal caves and bunkers. This methodology proved so effective that it became standard doctrine for all Pacific operations. By early 1945, as American forces prepared for the climactic battles of Iwo Jima and Okinawa, the M2 flamethrower had established itself as an indispensable weapon in the Pacific arsenal. Production facilities were working at maximum capacity to meet demand, while training programs expanded to provide qualified operators for the massive amphibious assaults ahead. The weapon that had entered combat as an experimental device had proven its value through blood and fire, setting the stage for even more devastating applications in the battles to come. The volcanic sands of Iwo Jima would witness the debut of America's most feared mechanical innovation of World War II, the flame-throwing Sherman tank that Japanese defenders would come to know simply as Satan. These modified M4A3 Sherman tanks, mounting massive flame projectors in place of their main guns, represented the ultimate evolution of American fire warfare technology and would prove devastating to Japanese defensive psychology in ways that conventional armor never could. The development of mechanized flamethrowers emerged from harsh lessons learned during the early Pacific campaigns. While portable M2 flamethrowers had proven tactically effective, their limited range and extreme danger to operators restricted their use in major assaults. Military planners recognized that mounting flame weapons on armored vehicles could provide the protection and fuel capacity needed for sustained operations against heavily fortified positions. However, the technical challenges of adapting tank chassis for flame projection proved far more complex than initially anticipated. The secret development program began at Schofield Barracks in Hawaii under Colonel Unmacht's top-secret Flamethrower Group, a composite organization combining Navy Seabees, Army engineers, and Marine Corps technicians. Working in a converted maintenance facility, this dedicated team faced the challenge of transforming standard Sherman tanks into mobile flame weapons capable of operating in the brutal conditions of Pacific Island warfare. The project operated under such secrecy that even senior military commanders remained unaware of its existence until combat testing began. The technical specifications of the flame tank system represented cutting-edge military engineering. Each converted Sherman carried 290 gallons of napalm mixture in specially designed fuel tanks, providing enough capacity for extended combat operations without frequent refueling. The flame projector, mounted in place of the standard 75mm gun, could hurl streams of burning napalm up to 150 yards with devastating accuracy. This range advantage over portable flamethrowers allowed tank crews to engage enemy positions from relatively safe distances while maintaining the psychological impact of flame weapons. The first combat deployment of flame tanks occurred during the Saipan campaign in June 1944, where 24 modified M3 light tanks participated in mopping up operations against Japanese cave complexes. The psychological impact proved immediate and profound. In one documented engagement, 200 Japanese soldiers defending a cave system with dual entrances faced a coordinated attack combining conventional tactics with flame tank operations. Machine gun teams covered one cave opening, while a flame tank, protected by standard Sherman escorts, approached the primary entrance and fired a sustained burst of napalm into the underground complex. The results were psychologically devastating for Japanese defenders. Rather than face the expanding inferno within their fortified position, 150 enemy soldiers fled directly into prepared machine gun positions, choosing certain death from conventional weapons over the possibility of being burned alive. This incident, repeated across multiple Pacific battlefields, demonstrated the flame tank's ability to break Japanese defensive psychology in ways that conventional weapons could not achieve. Japanese military leadership quickly recognized the threat posed by American flame tanks and issued specific tactical directives for countering them. Captured documents from the 32nd Army headquarters on Okinawa revealed detailed instructions for anti-tank operations specifically targeting flame-throwing vehicles. Japanese soldiers received training in identifying flame tanks by their distinctive appearance and were instructed to prioritize their destruction even above conventional armor threats. The desperation of Japanese anti-tank efforts against flame vehicles illustrated their psychological impact on enemy forces. Suicide attacks using satchel charges, previously reserved for the most critical situations, became routine responses to flame tank appearances. Japanese soldiers demonstrated unprecedented willingness to sacrifice themselves in attempts to disable flame-throwing vehicles, often ignoring nearby conventional tanks to focus exclusively on eliminating the flame threat. The effectiveness of flame tanks reached its peak during the Iwo Jima campaign, where 8 M4A3 flame-throwing Shermans operated continuously for 36 days against the most formidable defensive positions encountered in the Pacific War. The volcanic island's cave networks, carved from solid rock and connected by underground tunnels, represented the ultimate test of American flame warfare technology. Conventional weapons, including naval bombardment and aerial attack, had proven largely ineffective against these positions, leaving ground forces to face seemingly impregnable defensive networks. Combat reports from Iwo Jima documented the flame tank's systematic destruction of Japanese defensive positions that had resisted weeks of conventional attack. One flame tank crew reported neutralizing a fortified complex in 6 hours that had previously withstood 5 days of combined attack by a tank battalion and 3 infantry companies. The psychological effect on Japanese defenders proved as important as the physical destruction, with many positions being abandoned rather than face direct flame attack. The tactical employment of flame tanks evolved rapidly during combat operations, with crews developing innovative techniques for maximizing their effectiveness. The hose extension system, improvised using Navy fire hoses, allowed flame tanks to reach cave openings and fortified positions that were otherwise inaccessible. Crews would connect 400 feet of hose to their fuel systems, enabling infantry teams to carry portable flame guns deep into cave networks while maintaining fuel supply from the protected tank. One particularly successful engagement involved a captain and sergeant who, under covering fire, carried a hose extension to the top of an escarpment and eliminated several hundred Japanese soldiers who had taken shelter in cliffside caves. This type of innovative tactical employment demonstrated the versatility of the flame tank system and its ability to reach enemy positions that other weapons could not effectively engage. The psychological warfare aspects of flame tank operations extended far beyond their immediate tactical effects. Japanese radio intercepts revealed growing panic among enemy commanders as reports of flame tank activities spread throughout defensive networks. The distinctive sound of flame tank engines became a source of terror for Japanese troops, who would often abandon well-prepared positions upon hearing the approach of American armor, even when unable to determine if the approaching vehicles actually carried flame weapons. By the conclusion of the Iwo Jima campaign, flame tanks had established themselves as the most psychologically effective weapons in the American arsenal. The 8 vehicles participating in the operation consumed 360,000 gallons of napalm mixture while destroying over 1,000 fortified positions. More significantly, post-battle analysis credited flame tanks with reducing American casualties by an estimated 5,000 men through their ability to neutralize enemy positions that would otherwise have required costly infantry assaults. The success of flame tanks at Iwo Jima led to massive expansion of the program, with production facilities working around the clock to meet demand for the upcoming Okinawa operation. The psychological impact of these mechanical demons had fundamentally altered the nature of Pacific warfare, creating a new category of terror that Japanese defenders found impossible to counter effectively. The stage was set for the largest deployment of flame tanks in military history, as American forces prepared for their final assault on Japan's outer defensive perimeter. The dawn of April 1st, 1945, brought with it the largest amphibious assault in Pacific history as American forces launched Operation Iceberg, the invasion of Okinawa. What awaited them was not only the most sophisticated Japanese defensive system ever constructed, but also the opportunity to deploy flame warfare technology on an unprecedented scale. The 82-day battle that followed would witness the pinnacle of flamethrower effectiveness and demonstrate why Japanese soldiers had developed such profound psychological terror of American fire weapons. The Japanese defense of Okinawa represented the culmination of defensive doctrine developed throughout the Pacific War. Under the command of Lieutenant General Mitsuru Ushijima, the 32nd Army had spent months preparing defensive positions that incorporated every lesson learned from previous island battles. The Shuri Line, a complex network of caves, tunnels, and reinforced positions carved into Okinawa's limestone hills, extended for miles across the island's southern region. These fortifications were designed specifically to counter American tactical advantages, including their devastating flame weapons. Intelligence reports revealed that Japanese engineers had modified their defensive construction techniques specifically to counter flamethrower attacks. Ventilation systems were redesigned with multiple baffles and filters to prevent napalm from flowing through cave networks. Firing positions were constructed with multiple exit routes, allowing defenders to escape flame attacks while maintaining defensive capability. Most significantly, Japanese troops received specialized training in anti-flamethrower tactics, including techniques for targeting flame weapon operators and methods for surviving flame attacks through rapid position abandonment. The American response to these enhanced Japanese defenses was the deployment of the 713th Tank Battalion, the first full battalion of flame-throwing tanks in military history. Equipped with 54 modified Sherman tanks carrying improved flame projectors and expanded fuel capacity, the 713th represented the ultimate evolution of mechanized flame warfare. Each tank carried enough napalm for sustained combat operations, while improved armor protection and tactical deployment allowed them to operate in the heavily defended terrain of southern Okinawa. The psychological impact of mass flame tank deployment became apparent within hours of their first combat employment. Unlike previous battles where individual flame weapons could be countered through focused defensive efforts, the scale of flame tank operations on Okinawa overwhelmed Japanese defensive psychology. Entire defensive sectors would collapse not through direct flame attack, but through the psychological pressure of knowing that flame tanks were operating in their vicinity. Combat reports from the 713th Tank Battalion documented the systematic destruction of Japanese defensive positions throughout the Okinawa campaign. Operating continuously for 85 days, the flame tanks consumed over 200,000 gallons of napalm while engaging targets ranging from individual spider holes to massive cave complexes housing hundreds of defenders. The battalion's tactics evolved to incorporate everything learned from previous campaigns, including the innovative use of hose extensions to reach positions inaccessible to direct tank fire. One of the most significant tactical developments during the Okinawa campaign was the coordinated use of flame tanks with infantry assault teams. The corkscrew and blowtorch technique reached its full development, with flame tank crews working in close coordination with demolition teams to systematically neutralize defensive positions. Flame tanks would first neutralize defenders with napalm attacks, followed immediately by infantry teams using explosive charges to permanently seal cave openings and prevent reoccupation. The psychological pressure on Japanese defenders reached unprecedented levels during the prolonged Okinawa campaign. Unlike previous island battles that concluded within days or weeks, the extended duration of fighting allowed the psychological effects of flame warfare to compound over time. Japanese soldiers who survived initial encounters with flame weapons carried their terror to other defensive positions, spreading demoralization throughout the defensive network. Medical reports from captured Japanese personnel revealed the profound psychological impact of sustained exposure to flame warfare. Many prisoners displayed symptoms consistent with severe psychological trauma, including inability to sleep, uncontrollable trembling when discussing flame attacks, and desperate attempts to surrender rather than face the possibility of encountering American flame weapons. Japanese medical personnel noted increasing incidents of soldiers abandoning defensive positions without orders, citing fear of flame attack as the primary motivation. The tactical effectiveness of flame weapons during the Okinawa campaign extended beyond their immediate destructive capability. Intelligence analysis revealed that Japanese commanders increasingly based tactical decisions on avoiding flame weapon encounters rather than maximizing defensive effectiveness. Positions that could have been held successfully against conventional weapons were abandoned when flame tanks appeared in the area, fundamentally disrupting Japanese defensive planning. The hose extension system reached its most sophisticated development during Okinawa operations, with flame tank crews connecting up to 400 feet of Navy fire hose to reach previously inaccessible cave systems. Infantry teams would carry portable flame guns deep into underground complexes, while maintaining fuel supply from protected tank positions. This technique proved particularly effective against the multi-level cave systems that characterized Okinawan defensive positions, allowing American forces to systematically clear underground networks that had been considered impregnable. One documented engagement exemplified the psychological devastation caused by flame weapons during the Okinawa campaign. A 7th Infantry Division captain and sergeant, utilizing hose extension equipment, reached the top of a heavily defended escarpment and eliminated several hundred Japanese soldiers who had taken shelter in cliffside positions. The engagement demonstrated not only the tactical versatility of flame weapons, but also their ability to break enemy morale across entire defensive sectors. The statistical record of flame tank operations during Okinawa revealed their unprecedented effectiveness in Pacific warfare. The 713th Tank Battalion was credited with eliminating 4,188 Japanese soldiers while capturing only 49 prisoners, demonstrating the limited options available to defenders facing flame attack. American casualties within the battalion totaled just 8 killed and 111 wounded, producing a kill ratio of nearly 40-1, far exceeding any conventional weapon system employed during the campaign. The psychological impact of flame warfare extended beyond immediate tactical effects to influence Japanese strategic planning for the defense of the home islands. Intercepted communications revealed growing concern among Japanese military leadership about their ability to counter American flame weapons in future battles. Planning documents for Operation Ketsugo, the defense of Japan proper, devoted extensive sections to anti-flamethrower tactics and the construction of defensive positions specifically designed to minimize vulnerability to flame attack. As the Okinawa campaign drew to its bloody conclusion in June 1945, American military leaders recognized that flame weapons had fundamentally altered the nature of Pacific warfare. The psychological terror inspired by flamethrowers had proven as important as their tactical effectiveness, breaking Japanese defensive morale in ways that conventional weapons could never achieve. The stage was set for the final confrontation with the Japanese Empire, where flame weapons would undoubtedly play a decisive role in overcoming the fanatical resistance expected in the defense of the home islands. The final chapter of flame warfare's psychological impact emerged through post-war interviews with Japanese veterans, revealing the profound mental trauma that American fire weapons had inflicted upon enemy forces throughout the Pacific Campaign. These testimonies, collected by American military historians and intelligence analysts in the years following Japan's surrender, provided unprecedented insight into why flamethrowers had proven so devastatingly effective against an enemy renowned for their willingness to fight to the death. The cultural context of Japanese military psychology provides essential understanding of why flame weapons prove so uniquely terrifying to enemy soldiers. Japanese military doctrine emphasized Bushido, the way of the warrior, which glorified honorable death in combat while treating survival through surrender as the ultimate disgrace. Soldiers were indoctrinated from their earliest training to view death in battle as the highest possible achievement, creating a mindset that made conventional weapons relatively ineffective as psychological tools. However, the nature of flame warfare fundamentally disrupted this psychological conditioning. Japanese soldiers could face bullets, artillery shells, and aerial bombardment with stoic determination because these weapons offered possibilities for heroic resistance or honorable death. A defender facing rifle fire could return accurate shots, potentially eliminating enemy soldiers before dying himself. Artillery bombardments allowed for last-minute charges or suicidal attacks that fulfilled cultural expectations of warrior behavior. But flames offered no such possibilities for honorable resistance. Post-war testimony from Corporal Toshio Kondo, who survived a flame attack at Sugarloaf Hill during the Okinawa campaign, revealed the psychological devastation experienced by Japanese defenders. Death held no fear for us. We were already dead by choice, seeking honorable death in service to the Emperor. But flame tanks offered no honor. You cannot fight fire. You can only burn or run. There is no courage in burning alive, no way to strike back at flames. The physical properties of napalm created psychological effects that extended far beyond its immediate destructive capability. Unlike conventional weapons that produced instantaneous casualties, napalm continued burning for extended periods, creating prolonged suffering that could be heard by nearby defenders. The sticky nature of the fuel mixture meant that it could not be easily removed or extinguished, transforming what should have been honorable military positions into death traps that offered no possibility of heroic resistance. Sergeant Major Yoshio Yamada of the 32nd Army, a veteran with 8 years of combat experience against Chinese, British, Australian, and American forces, provided perhaps the most revealing testimony about the psychological impact of flame weapons. I had faced many enemies and many weapons since 1937. Machine guns, artillery, aircraft, tanks, all could be fought with skill and courage. Nothing compared to flame tanks. They removed combat from war and replaced it with extermination. There was no honor in facing flames, no possibility of glorious death, only terror and the certainty of horrible suffering. The sound of approaching flame tanks created psychological effects that often preceded their actual use in combat. Japanese veterans consistently reported that the distinctive noise of Sherman tank engines had become associated with impending flame attack, creating panic even when the approaching vehicles carried conventional weapons. This acoustic conditioning demonstrated how the psychological impact of flame weapons extended beyond their direct tactical employment to influence enemy behavior across entire operational areas. Intelligence analysis revealed that Japanese military leadership recognized the psychological vulnerability their forces had developed regarding flame weapons. Training manuals captured during the final months of the war devoted extensive sections to overcoming fear of flame attack, indicating that enemy commanders understood the morale problems created by American fire weapons. However, these efforts proved largely unsuccessful as the fundamental nature of flame warfare remained incompatible with traditional Japanese military psychology. The underground warfare that characterized much of the Pacific Campaign created unique psychological pressures that flame weapons exploited with devastating effectiveness. Japanese defensive doctrine relied heavily on cave systems and underground tunnels that provided protection from conventional weapons, while allowing defenders to maintain concealment and surprise capability. However, these same positions became death traps when faced with flame attack, as napalm could flow through tunnel systems and ventilation networks to reach defenders in previously safe areas. The ventilation systems that made extended underground occupancy possible also served as conduits for flame weapons, creating psychological terror among Japanese defenders who could never be certain of their safety, even in the deepest cave positions. Veterans reported that the sound of napalm flowing through tunnel systems, described as a distinctive hissing or rushing noise, became a source of intense psychological trauma that persisted long after the war ended. The collaborative nature of Japanese defensive preparations, which relied on interconnected positions and mutual support between strongpoints, created additional psychological vulnerabilities that American flame weapons exploited effectively. When defenders witnessed flame attacks on nearby positions, the psychological impact spread throughout the defensive network. Units that had not been directly attacked would often abandon well-prepared positions rather than risk encountering flame weapons, fundamentally disrupting Japanese defensive coordination. The extended duration of flame weapon employment during campaigns like Okinawa allowed psychological effects to compound over time. Unlike brief encounters with conventional weapons, the prolonged exposure to flame warfare created cumulative psychological trauma that grew progressively worse as campaigns continued. Japanese veterans reported that the mere possibility of encountering flame weapons became more terrifying than actual combat with conventional forces. Post-war medical examination of Japanese prisoners and repatriated personnel revealed the lasting psychological effects of exposure to flame warfare. Many veterans displayed symptoms consistent with severe psychological trauma, including chronic anxiety, sleep disorders, and intense phobic reactions to fire or burning materials. American medical personnel noted that flame warfare veterans showed significantly higher rates of psychological disturbance compared to Japanese soldiers who had faced only conventional weapons. The ultimate testament to the psychological effectiveness of American flame weapons came through Japanese strategic planning for the defense of the home islands. Operation Ketsugo, Japan's plan for resisting American invasion, devoted unprecedented attention to countering flame weapons, indicating that enemy leadership recognized these weapons as potentially decisive factors in any future campaign. The psychological terror that flame weapons had created among Japanese forces had become a strategic concern for the highest levels of enemy command. As American forces prepared for the invasion of Japan that never came, military planners understood that flame weapons had achieved something unprecedented in modern warfare. They had broken the psychological conditioning of an enemy renowned for their fanatical resistance. The psychological terror that flamethrowers induced had become a weapon more powerful than the flames themselves, demonstrating that warfare's most decisive victories often occurred in the human mind rather than on the battlefield. The comprehensive analysis of Japanese fear responses to American flamethrowers revealed fundamental insights about the nature of psychological warfare. Traditional weapons, regardless of their destructive capability, operated within familiar frameworks of military engagement that allowed soldiers to maintain their psychological conditioning and cultural identity. Flamethrowers transcended these frameworks, creating a form of warfare that existed outside conventional military experience and cultural preparation. The testimony of Lieutenant Colonel Masaki Fujita, captured during the final weeks of the Okinawa campaign, provided perhaps the most revealing insight into the Japanese military mindset regarding flame weapons. "We prepared for death every day. Death was not our enemy, dishonor was our enemy, but flame weapons offered only dishonor. There was no way to die well while burning. Our ancestors could not be proud of soldiers who ran from their positions screaming. The Americans had found our weakness. They had discovered how to make death itself dishonorable. This psychological victory would prove to be one of the most significant achievements of American military innovation during World War II. The development of effective flame weapons had accomplished something that no previous military technology had achieved. It had fundamentally altered the psychological conditioning of an enemy force, renowned for their willingness to fight to the death. As American planners prepared for the invasion of Japan that never came, they understood that flame weapons had already won the most important battle of all, the battle for psychological dominance over their enemy. The atomic bombs that ended World War II in August 1945 prevented the ultimate test of flame weapons against Japanese home island defenses, but the psychological impact of American flamethrowers had already achieved something unprecedented in modern warfare. Post-war studies, conducted by American military historians, revealed that flame weapons had fundamentally altered Japanese military psychology in ways that would have made the invasion of Japan far less costly in American lives than originally projected. The 54 flame tanks of the 713th Tank Battalion, along with thousands of M2 portable flamethrowers, had accomplished what no conventional weapon could achieve. They had broken the psychological conditioning that made Japanese soldiers such formidable opponents. The terror inspired by these weapons extended far beyond their immediate tactical effects, creating a psychological legacy that influenced Japanese military thinking for decades after the war's end. Intelligence reports declassified in the 1970s revealed that Japanese planning for the defense of the home islands devoted unprecedented attention to countering American flame weapons, indicating that these devices had become the primary concern of enemy military leadership. The psychological victory achieved by flamethrowers in the Pacific Theater demonstrated that warfare's most decisive weapons are often those that target the human spirit rather than the human body. The veterans who operated these terrible weapons carried their own psychological burdens long after the war ended, serving as a reminder that victory in warfare always comes at a cost to both sides. Their service with the most feared weapons in the Pacific Theater contributed to an American victory that might otherwise have required the invasion of Japan itself, potentially saving millions of lives on both sides of the conflict. The flamethrowers' legacy in World War II stands as a testament to the power of psychological warfare and the importance of understanding enemy mindset in military planning. These weapons succeeded not merely through their destructive capability, but through their ability to transcend cultural conditioning and create terror in the hearts of soldiers who had been trained from childhood to fear nothing more than dishonor. In achieving this psychological victory, American flame weapons had won the war in the minds of their enemies long before the atomic bombs ended the conflict itself. Thank you for watching this comprehensive exploration of why Japanese soldiers feared American flamethrowers more than any other weapon in World War II. If this documentary has provided you with new insights into this crucial aspect of Pacific Theater warfare, please consider subscribing to our channel for more in-depth historical content. We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to let us know where you're watching from around the world. Your engagement helps us continue producing these detailed historical documentaries that bring the stories of World War II to life.